If you react like this when he hugs you, his heart will be only yours. Carl Jung. Have you ever felt that the man you love is slowly drifting away, as if he's physically present but his heart is somewhere else? The hugs become superficial, the gazes no longer meet, and you wonder, how can I reconnect? How can I touch something deeper within him? Something that makes him never forget me. Today you will discover something Carl Jung never openly wrote about, a missing piece in his enigmatic manuscripts. It's not a dating trick, not a psychological ploy. It's an ancient ritual, a sacred moment created through a single embrace done the right way. And if you perform it with your full presence, his heart will have nowhere else to go but to stay with you. Because this embrace doesn't just touch the body, it touches his unconscious mind. It speaks in a primal language that the male soul always quietly listens to. An embrace, when done as I'm about to share, can awaken the sacred feminine within him, making him not only remember you, but also realize, this is where I belong. Number 1. Decoding Jung on why an embrace can change everything. Some embraces make you forget the passage of time itself. An embrace where, when you close your eyes, the world around you fades and only one thing remains clear. You are seen, felt, and touched at the deepest part of your being. But what truly happens in those seemingly simple moments? For Carl Jung, it's not just physical touch, it's the communion of archetypes. It's when the collective unconscious speaks through a profoundly human gesture. Jung believed that within every man's soul exists a primal feminine image, the anima. This is not the image of a specific woman, but a sacred archetype representing emotion, intuition, nurturing, and inner connection. Anima is rarely expressed directly, yet it silently shapes how men love, how they long, and how they feel. This is my woman. An embrace, when given with full presence and genuine emotion, is the most powerful way to awaken the anima in a man's unconscious. Ask yourself, why do some men never forget a woman even if their time together was brief? It's not because she was breathtakingly beautiful. It's not because she was adept at pleasing or speaking sweet words. It's because at some moment she touched his soul. Jung called these moments archetypal imprinting, a mark of the archetype. It's when an experience reaches the depths of the psyche, bypassing layers of logic and reason and connecting with emotional memories, symbols, and ancient instincts. An embrace is not merely an embrace. It becomes an inner ritual, a living symbol, a signal the anima cannot ignore. Biologically, modern science supports Jung's intuitive insight. When we embrace someone, especially for a prolonged period, with just the right amount of pressure and from a place of genuine emotion, the body releases oxytocin, often referred to as the bonding hormone or love hormone. Oxytocin not only calms the nervous system, but it also activates the hippocampus, the brain's memory processing center, and the amygdala, the center for storing emotions. This combination causes the experience to be etched deeply and enduringly in a man's mind, especially when paired with a powerful emotional impression. This is why some embraces are nearly impossible to forget. Even years later, after a relationship has ended and both have moved on, a man might still recall the feeling of being held by her as if it happened yesterday. But not every embrace holds this power. A mechanical, cursory, or distracted embrace performed while the mind is elsewhere is merely an empty biological act. To create archetypal imprinting, you must offer the embrace from a different space. One without strategy, without expectations, without tricks. Only presence, only receptivity, only genuine emotion. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and to become your true self, especially as a woman deeply connected to her sacred essence. You must learn to offer that presence through the smallest gestures." In an embrace, you're not just touching a person, you're awakening their soul, making them feel something long forgotten. The sense of safety, acceptance, and understanding without needing to strive. Imagine a man who has just faced a major failure. He's lost, disoriented, and feels the world has no place for him. At that moment, a woman approaches and embraces him with complete presence. No advice, no expectations, just me here with you. In that embrace, he is not only comforted, but he is also reminded of himself through the forgotten anima. This is an example of healing through presence, which Jung emphasized as essential in every journey of individuation. Or consider another example rarely mentioned. Powerful, successful men are often the ones who crave true connection the most. They are surrounded by superficial relationships, hollow compliments, and conditional attention. But if a woman can offer them an unconditional embrace, free of demands and free of expectations, it can pierce through every defense they've built in life. So I ask you, when was the last time you were truly present in an embrace? Have you ever given an embrace so genuine that the other person not only remembers you, but feels reborn in that moment? An embrace is not a tactic to make him think of you. It is a living ritual, the language of the soul, a gateway to the deepest unconscious of a man where anima quietly waits to be named. And once you know how to reach that part, not with words, but with emotional touch, with energy, with truth, his heart cannot help but remember you. In a modern world where connections are rushed and shallow, the Jungian embrace is a profoundly rebellious act, a revolution of tenderness, a declaration that I'm not here to conquer you. I'm here to be present with you and awaken the most beautiful part of you, the part even you have long forgotten. Number 2, decoding the soul-marking embrace. 3 stages. Each stage corresponds to a deeper layer within the male unconscious. 1 conscious approach. If the previous part helped you understand why an embrace can become a lasting emotional imprint in a man's psyche, now is the time to step into the actual journey of embodying it. An embrace has no inherent power on its own. It only becomes a rite of transformation when it is offered with full presence. And that doesn't begin with your arms. It begins with the energy you bring before you even touch him. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." To him, the true journey of a human being isn't about finding someone else, but about returning inward to realize what they're living by and why. The embrace you are about to offer isn't merely a gesture of affection. It's an invitation for a man to step out of a state of unconscious defense and feel himself fully. But to make that possible, you must enter the moment consciously, without rushing, without expectation, and without armor. That is the first step. Approaching an embrace with conscious awareness is a subtle yet powerful act. Before stepping forward, pause for a moment. Take a deep breath, not as a technique, but to return to yourself, to drop back into the center of your emotions, the heart. When you are fully present in your own body, the energy you radiate becomes unmistakably different. And men, even if they can't express it in words, always feel this at a primal level. The unconscious registers the difference between a woman who is truly present and one who is merely performing affection. In that moment, your gaze becomes the first bridge between 2 souls. Jung called this archetypal recognition, the recognition of something ancient and essential. It means you don't look at him as a lover, a boyfriend, or any specific role. You see him as the embodiment of a raw, primordial masculinity. The part that has been repressed and hidden but is deeply longing to be seen. And something remarkable happens when a person feels truly seen. They begin to reconnect with themselves. The wounding softens. The mask begins to fall, and the unconscious begins to open. The power of your gaze doesn't lie in its length. It lies in its quality. A stare held too long can feel intrusive or dominating. A glance too brief can feel detached. But if you allow yourself to see him from a quiet place, without judgment, without expectation, and without seduction, simply seeing him exactly as he is, then that becomes the signal his unconscious needs to recognize something essential. I am safe. I am accepted. As Jung once wrote, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Only when you can truly see your own heart can you see another person. Not through the lens of need, but through presence. There is a real story from a successful middle-aged man. After a stretch of overwhelming pressure and silence, he came home completely depleted. His wife didn't ask him anything. She simply looked at him, walked over, and embraced him. Her eyes held no worry, no attempt to fix, no pressure, just a gaze of pure empathy, as if saying, I see how much you're holding, and I'm here. He said it was the moment he broke into tears, not from pain, but from being understood without explanation. An embrace that began with recognition had cracked the armor of ego just enough for the soul to exhale. Have you ever looked at someone like that? Not to evaluate them, not to convince them to change, but to let them feel. I don't have to pretend around you. When was the last time you were fully present in a moment of connection, not just with your hands, but with your heart? Not to do something for them, but simply to be there with them as yourself. Jung believed that every moment of deep human connection is an opportunity for the unconscious to surface and the conscious self to expand. When you approach someone in this state, you're not just offering affection, you are opening a spiritual doorway. Your presence becomes the medium through which that man feels seen, touched, and awakened. Especially the soft, intuitive, emotional dimension within him that the world often tells him to suppress. A meaningful embrace begins at the point of approach, and a meaningful approach doesn't depend on technique. It depends on the quality of mind and heart you bring. If you're anxious, guarded, overthinking, or skeptical, your body will transmit that signal. But if you approach with inner calm, with compassionate curiosity, and with a silent commitment that says, I'm here truly, then you've already done something extraordinary. You've created sacred space for the embrace to become ritual. A conscious approach is not a technique. It is a state of presence. The first gift you offer a man before your body ever touches his. And if you can enter this state, then everything that follows, the emotional synchronization and the release of energy will unfold naturally as the consequence of pure soul-to-soul contact. Are you ready? Because the moment you approach someone with your heart, you're not just holding them, you are awakening something in them and yourself. And that is when the journey truly begins. 2. The synchronized embrace. Once you've moved through the moment of conscious approach, once your gaze has said what words cannot, your body now begins to deliver an even deeper message. You are welcome. You don't need to do anything, just be. This is the moment you step into the second stage, the synchronized embrace. The synchronized embrace does not begin with the arms. It begins with energy. In reality, many hugs happen every day, but only a rare few imprint themselves in the mind and soul. Why? Because they're not performed with the hands. They're given the whole being. They come from a place so deep that you're no longer doing something to the other person, but simply being with them purely and fully. Carl Jung didn't speak much about hugging, but he spoke extensively about the integration between inner content and outward behavior. For him, anything expressed outwardly without true inner alignment is nothing but an empty shell. Nowhere is this more evident than in a hug. A hug performed from the head in terms of technique might be flawless in form but leave no impact. A hug from the gut, The place of raw, alive emotion may be brief, but can shift someone's entire emotional state. The secret lies in the synchronization of heartbeat, breath, and energetic rhythm. When you embrace someone with true presence, your heart rate slows, your breath becomes deeper and more even. And here's the miracle. The other person's body will begin to adjust in resonance with yours. This isn't spiritual fluff, it's a neurological reality. Mirror neurons, the brain cells responsible for empathy, are powerfully activated when two people share physical touch from a harmonized emotional state. In that moment, his brain doesn't just register physical contact, it feels what you're feeling. If you are grounded in peace, acceptance, and love, your unconscious will experience the same. This is why a hug can soothe anger, heal hurt feelings, and sometimes say more than 1,000 apologies ever could. It does what language cannot. It reaches the subconscious. To deepen this experience, you can practice an ancient technique, often used in healing rituals: visualization. When you hug, close your eyes or keep your gaze soft and imagine a warm golden light surrounding you both. That light doesn't need to do anything. It simply exists like a loving field of magnetism enveloping you, protecting you, connecting you, and dissolving everything that no longer serves. In Jung's symbolic psychology, gold represents the light of consciousness, inner awakening, and positive transformation. This simple act of visualization, even if the other person isn't aware of it, has a very real impact on the emotional field between you. One thoughtful example. A psychotherapist once shared her experience working with adult men who had experienced early childhood attachment trauma. During therapy, she did not physically touch them, but in certain moments, she described, "I simply sat near them and sent the energy that they were accepted exactly as they were, even without physical contact. I could see their breath shift and their voices soften. It was as if the hurt inside them was being soothed by something invisible, yet profoundly real. A synchronized embrace given from such a space may be more powerful than any words of comfort." And you don't need to be a therapist. You only need sincerity. When you hug someone, it's not to be hugged back, not to achieve anything, but simply to say with your body, "You're safe. I'm here. No conditions." Something deep inside that man will never forget that moment. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And the same applies to connection. The bravest thing is to accept another person without trying to change them. A synchronized embrace is a moment of that kind of pure acceptance. And because it is so rare, it becomes a powerful unconscious imprint. At that point, you are no longer hugging him just as a woman holding a man she loves. You are embracing the collective masculine, the part that carries pressure, control, and loneliness that so many men are never allowed to admit. And when you hold that part with gentleness, without judgment, without interference, you touch a place no one else has touched, not even him. Ask yourself this: the next time you hug someone, will you have the courage to drop your defenses? Can you be brave enough to not do something for them, but just be fully with them? And can you hold in your heart one simple, powerful message? I am not hugging you to get anything. I'm hugging you so you know you are worthy of love even if you do nothing. In a world where everything comes with conditions, an unconditional embrace given through presence, emotional rhythm, and inner light becomes a sacred act of quiet revolution. And in that moment, even if he doesn't realize it right away, that man will carry you into his unconscious indelibly. Third, intentional release. Every profound ritual calls for a conscious closing, and so does an embrace. One that begins with presence and sincere connection becomes incomplete if it ends abruptly, carelessly, or without awareness. How you let go is the final message you send to his unconscious. Done with care, it doesn't just leave behind an emotion. It leaves behind an archetypal imprint, as Jung described. Jung understood the profound weight of seemingly small actions. He believed that when an act is performed with sacred intent, it transcends ordinary gestures and becomes a living symbol woven into the collective unconscious. This insight holds especially true in the final moment of an embrace. For this reason, avoid stepping away as if wrapping up a social formality. Instead, withdraw slowly, as though giving both souls a chance to recalibrate, to integrate what just occurred. And as your arms begin to release, hold his gaze for one more breath, not with longing, not waiting for a reaction, but with a quiet, honest presence that says, "I see you. I'm still here, and what just happened was real." Symbols are the natural language of the unconscious, Jung once wrote. That's why the next part of this ritual is a simple but deeply resonant gesture. Lightly press 2 points on his back, one beneath his left shoulder blade and the other at the right side of his lower back. These areas contain dense neural pathways linked to emotional memory and bodily perception. When you apply the lightest touch, not obvious, not forced, in these exact locations at the moment of parting, you're creating a sensory anchor. His unconscious will tie this subtle sensation to the emotional truth you've just shared. Neuroscience describes this as a touch emotion, association where the body retains experience not through imagery or language, but through the nervous system state paired with physical sensation. A single intentional touch at the right place, time, and energetic frequency is stored in the amygdala and hippocampus as an emotionally encoded memory, a living symbol embedded in his nervous system. Years from now, he may not recall the moment clearly, but if someone touches him that way, he might feel an inexplicable ache, not for the new person, but for that one primal moment with you. Jung called this the ritualization of touch, transforming a physical action into a symbolic gesture that the unconscious recognizes as sacred. In modern society, we've forgotten the language of ritual, but the unconscious, that ancient part of the psyche, has not. It still responds powerfully to acts performed with sacred space, clear intention, and pure presence. Women who've practiced this technique in everyday life often describe the same shift. The man, even without words, begins to relate to them differently. The urgency disappears. The dynamic deepens. There's a new silence between them, not emptiness, but weight, presence. A sense that says, with her, I can be myself. And I remember that. Have you ever felt someone step away from you with unspoken reverence? A parting that lingers in your body even after they're gone? That kind of memory doesn't come from technique. It comes from love, from the intentional presence carried in each gesture down to the smallest touch. In that closing moment, when you gently release the embrace, hold his gaze for one breath and leave those 2 subtle imprints. You are not ending an act. You are sealing an experience. You are leaving behind an invisible mark. This was real. This was sacred. This was a connection. And the most powerful part is that you don't need to say a word. Jung always emphasized that the most profound experiences need no verbal explanation. They only need to be lived fully and honestly. In a noisy world, a woman who can touch and then walk away with full presence, without clinging, without abandoning, and who simply leaves behind a silence that resonates is rare. Have you ever left that kind of silence with someone? Not through beauty, not through intellect, but through the way you walked away and somehow remained? This final stage isn't grand, it isn't loud, but in its quiet, its stillness, and your full awareness, it gives the embrace its lasting power. It becomes a symbol, a living memory, An archetypal experience his unconscious may never articulate, but will never forget. Not with his mind, but with the subtle ache in his heart that whispers, "Somewhere once I was held like that, and I've never forgotten." Number 3. Why this embrace makes him never forget you. When you offer an embrace grounded in full presence, synchronized in breath, energy, and emotion, then withdraw with intentional ritual. You do more than leave a pleasant impression. You plant an archetypal memory deep within his unconscious, and that is why he will never forget you. This kind of embrace doesn't just move through surface emotions. It activates a much deeper layer in the male psyche, which Jung described as the symbolic seeking layer of the woman. Not just any woman, but the woman, the living embodiment of the anima within him. As Jung wrote, every man carries within him the eternal image of woman. Not the image of this or that particular woman, but a definite feminine image. This image, he explained, shapes how men love, choose, bond, and remember. When you embrace him in a way that resonates across conscious, subconscious, and unconscious levels, you stop being just a woman in his life. You become a living symbol of the woman in his psyche. You touch the sacred feminine within him, the part he's always been drawn to, even if he's never known how to name it. She is the one who makes him feel safe without judgment and vulnerable without shame. Present without having to prove himself. Jung clarified that the anima does not arise from personal experience, but from the collective unconscious. Which means, when you awaken that archetypal layer in a man, you are not just speaking to the man in front of you, you are speaking to the entire history of his soul. And that's precisely why the imprint you leave cannot be replaced by another form, no matter how many women he meets afterward. One of the most powerful real-life stories illustrating this comes from a well-known film director who once had a brief romance with a woman who was neither famous nor publicly extraordinary. They were together for only a few months, yet years later he said, "She's the only person who, when she touched me, made the universe feel like it paused to listen." What he described wasn't attraction. It was soul activation, what Jung might call a moment of symbolic resonance, where a person becomes a living symbol in someone else's life. Have you ever considered this possibility? That is what makes you unforgettable. Might not lie in what you said, did, or displayed, but in the way you awakened a part of their soul that had never been touched before. Have you ever felt that even after distance or parting, someone still remembers you? Not because you were more beautiful or interesting, but because you were the first to truly see them? Notice how many men go through multiple relationships, even sexually intimate ones, yet continue to carry in their hearts the memory of a woman they may have only known for a short while. Not because they regret losing her, but because with her, they became the truest version of themselves. And once that part is awakened, it cannot be forgotten. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and the embrace you gave, if it was deep and real enough, may have done exactly that for him." At that moment, you weren't just a romantic partner. You were a symbolic guide, a bridge between his ego and his soul. Interestingly, most men don't consciously recognize this at the time. They don't walk away from the hug thinking she was the image of my number, but they feel something stirring, a subtle disorientation, a lingering emotional echo they can't quite name. And when night falls, their mind returns to that moment. Not because of what you said, not because of the stories you shared, but because of the feeling you left behind. That feeling isn't logic, it's a symbol. A participant in a group therapy session once shared, "I don't remember most of what my ex did for me, but I still remember the one time she hugged me after I lost my father. That hug was the only thing that kept me standing. And even though we're no longer together, I know I'll never forget her. Not because of love, but because of presence." This is the clearest example. of what happens when you embrace not from form, but from soul. When you become a living symbol, not just a gesture. In a world increasingly dominated by logic, performance, and surface metrics, feminine presence with depth has become rare. And that's precisely why, if you still carry the ability to truly be present, you become irreplaceable. You don't need to be the most beautiful, the most intelligent, or the most impressive. You only need to awaken something sacred and ancient within him. That's what makes you unforgettable. Not because you tried to hold on to someone, but because you awakened a part of them that no one else had ever touched. And from that moment on, everyone else is only trying to imitate what they can't quite reach. Have you ever touched someone's soul like that? If not, do you dare try? Not through effort or striving, but by showing up as who you truly are, whole, present, with nothing to prove. That state of full-hearted presence is what the male unconscious is always seeking, and once found, it is never forgotten. Number 4, self-transformation. The embrace that changes not only him, but also you. And here is perhaps the most astonishing truth. That man may never forget you. But not only because you touched his soul, it's also because in doing so, you touched your own. When you embrace someone with full presence, you don't just awaken something sacred in them. You are retraining your nervous system, your heart, and your soul. This is something many women overlook. The embrace you give, if it is truly present, becomes one of the most powerful tools for personal transformation. Carl Jung never viewed loving another as a separate act. For him, love was always part of the individuation process, the journey through which you become the most whole version of yourself. And that journey never happens in isolation. It always unfolds through relationships, especially through sacred, intentional, emotionally resonant interaction. A hug is not a social gesture. If you offer it properly, it becomes a meaningful stage in your inner growth. You may wonder, how could something as simple as a hug change me? The answer lies in repetition. Every time you choose to be truly present, every time you embrace someone without defenses, without calculation, without needing anything in return, you are rewiring your nervous system to love without fear. And in a world where women are taught to close off, to protect themselves, to play by the rules, and to avoid getting hurt, that is an act of quiet revolution. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And a truly sacred hug begins with that very act, accepting yourself first. You cannot embrace another with your soul if you are still rejecting parts of your being. You cannot offer safety to someone else if you haven't learned how to be at home within your own heart. The hug you give becomes a silent declaration. I am whole enough not to need anything from you. I am here to share, not to possess. And when you practice this deeply and consistently, it stops being a technique. It becomes your natural state, a way of being. The state of a woman who has found her center, who lives from her true self without pretense, without striving, without seeking validation from outside. I once heard a woman share that after learning to give a truly present hug, she realized she had always longed to touch others but had been afraid of being seen. So she had been hugging with half a heart. But the miracle came when she began to hug with her whole heart. Not only did others shift, but she felt healed herself. She said, "I no longer feel empty. I no longer hug to be loved. I hug because I already love." Do you see the difference? A hug given from lack always contains some demand. A hug given from wholeness brings liberation to both others, and that shift is a spiritual turning point on the path of individuation. Jung believed each of us must confront ourselves through real human interaction, reconcile the inner opposites, and find true integration. Have you ever asked yourself, From what place do I hug others? Is it to be loved back? To avoid being abandoned? Or because I'm truly present? Is it to fill something within me? Or to offer something pure without needing to hold on to it? When you learn to embrace your whole being, the transformation doesn't just happen in the other person, it happens to your entire energetic presence. You begin to move through life with deep knowing. I don't need to control. I don't need to cling. I just need to be fully here. And from that space, every connection becomes sacred. Interestingly, you'll notice that this shift isn't limited to romantic love. It spills into the way you hug your children, your friends, and even yourself when you're exhausted. A woman who knows how to embrace with awareness is a woman who can heal, reconnect, and stir life wherever she goes. And when you live in that state long enough, you no longer need to chase anyone. You no longer try to make someone remember you, because you've become the very symbol of the woman, the awakener, the source, and the irreplaceable presence. But more importantly, you didn't do it for them. You did it to return to yourself. And in that very return, you began to shine. Jung wrote, "Individuation means becoming an individual. And insofar as individuality embraces our innermost, last, and incomparable uniqueness, it also implies becoming oneself." Not everyone is ready for that path, because it requires letting go of the need to be loved in the way you want, and learning instead to love through the way you are present. The embrace you give, when practiced as a sacred ritual, as a living vow to be real, to be deep, to be whole, becomes not just a memorable experience for the other person. It becomes a portal through which you return to the most sacred part of yourself, the part the world once made you forget. And when you return to that part, you no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need anyone to remember you. You have become unforgettable in the very act of becoming who you truly are, and so you've come to the end of the journey of an embrace. No longer a simple act of intimacy, but an ancient ritual reborn in the modern world. A sacred moment where two souls can truly touch one another and touch themselves again. That kind of embrace, if given with full presence, with unconditional love, and with conscious awareness, leaves a permanent imprint on the unconscious of the man who receives it. Something that cannot be erased, cannot be imitated. But more precious still is this: you will never be the same again. Every time you give an embrace from that sacred space, you're not just connecting. You are healing not only the other person, but also yourself. You are reestablishing your relationship with the deep feminine within you, the part long buried beneath the noise of life, yet still longing to breathe, to live, and to love without fear. Now, I invite you to pause. Write down in the comments below a single word that represents the energy or experience you wish to bring into the world through your embrace. It could be a connection, it could be awareness, it could be presence, or any word that comes from your heart, because the moment you write it, you're not just speaking to others. You're sending a signal to your unconscious. I am ready to live truthfully, to live deeply, and to love as a sacred act. Share this video, this message, if you feel it has touched something within you, because true connection is not just a passing feeling, it is a whisper from the soul. The very thing Jung believed could change the entire spiritual landscape of a person's life. Let every embrace you give from this moment on become a conscious ritual, a moment of depth, a matching of heartbeats. And maybe, just maybe, you, without striving, without clinging, will become the kind of woman who cannot be forgotten.